stop in the sand. And Giddings and Stewart, well, they've had their problems, of course, as have Morton and Clearahan. So all three of those cars have had problems during the race. And that's the order in Class A, the leader having completed 72 laps. Faulkner in the car at the moment. So no wonder he was so impatient to get out of the trap. And those marshals and helpers down there keeping him in the lead. But that's our overall race leader. It's Glenn Seaton up on Tony Longhurst in the BMW. Last year's winner of the race with Jim Richards.
And what a massive lead he has. With Alan Moffat just coming by down the main grandstand now. His lead is 1 minute 28 seconds.
So since our last gap, he's pulled it out 13 seconds.
Yes, over Alan Moffat. He's gained 13 seconds, as you say, Peter. He's now lapping Jim Richards. I think we'll see this accomplished as we look then at the Terry Shield car in front of it on the track, but of course a lap, no, on the same number of laps. It's that much of a lap, in fact. If you go round from Terry Shield, right round to the tail of the lead car, well then that's the gap. And down in the pits, John Smokes.
Well, the normally reliable 2-litre class is certainly running into its problems at the Castrol 500 today. With me is John Smith, the man who has led the vanguard of the 2-litre classes all year. What's gone wrong, John?
Seems like it's busted a gearbox, John, and you wouldn't believe it, it's the only non-standard Toyota part in the car.
The rest of the Toyotas are looking good. Of course, one's been visiting the sand trap for some time.
I think, yeah, John Faulkner went out just after his pit stop on cold tyres. I think he sort of rushed in a bit deep under brakes, but he's going again. I think he's got 2.5 laps in front anyway, no problem.
Well, of course, earlier in the race, the Nissan was looking pretty good before it had a crash in the opening laps.
Yeah, he centre punched me in the first corner, and I think he just sort of overcooked it under brakes as well. But he's still going.
Well, after a year of no competition, you Toyota guys have now got the Nissan up with you. He's giving you some sort of cover.
Yeah, it's a very good little car and well run, well organised, but you know, we're racing against a 2-litre car with a 1.6, but we're still doing it all right.
Well, it must be a disappointment to you to be standing in the pits right now.
Sandown's been a bit of a hoodoo to me. I've failed here 3 times in 3 meetings, so I don't know what it is to Sandown.
John Smith down there with John Smales, and there's a Commodore that's gone off. It's one of the, it's the Lusty car. Don't know which Lusty was at the wheel. Graham or Ken. Either way, they've been perhaps too lusty on that corner.
Well, no, it was blowing its engine as it came down the straight just a little while ago. It was, instead of the oil staying in the sump and circulating, it was being
Marshall's
burnt.
backing off very quickly there.
That's Graham in the car. Brother Ken's got out.
So, not very long ago, down at the end of the main straight, we saw this action in the Mulver Hill Commodore.
Tony, jump on the brakes, lock it up, oil in the sand trap.
Great credit, he knew where he was going. He'd done a 360 and another half spin, and he knew exactly where he was going. There it is. Beautiful recovery, in fact, in the sense that he didn't have to bring the car to rest and to work out where he was. He knew exactly where he was and kept going.
This is our second place car, 1 minute 28 down, Alan Moffat. Chasing, vainly it appears this stage, Glenn Seaton, who seems to be increasing the gap.
Yes, in fact, the left-hand floor, just forward of where the seat would be in that car, as both Bailey and Moffat go out onto the curbing, using just a little bit more than all the track. Here's a whole slab of weight, because as Brock points out, we were racing these cars at around 1,200 odd kilos, and now in Group A specifications, they have to be 1,325 for cars around 5 litres. So the weight of the car set by FISA, the motorsport governing body in Paris, relates to the engine capacity. The bigger the engine, the more weight the car must carry.
That's the second place man, Moffat, on lap 74. And behind him is the third place car, Graham Bailey. May see it come into shot now. There it is, just at the top of the screen momentarily. Moffat heads up the back straight.
Moff seems to be laying off the car a little bit. He seems to be just taking it a bit easier than he really could. While he's been about a second or a second and a half slower than Brock, certainly he could drive it at those times if he wanted, but it's a long race. There's still a long way to go. Moffat cannot catch the car in front. He's under no real threat from behind, so he's sitting pat, going very fast indeed, but not at top speed. He's driving about 8.5 tenths.
So really relying on something going wrong with the skyline is Alan Moffat. Looks like he's trying to keep out of trouble with all those Commodores in front of him. The John Harvey car leads them.
Well, in fact, I was going to say that Harvey, who'd been well placed early on, qualified extremely well with Neil Lowe in the second of a Noble Holland dealer team cars, car number 3, is now down in 12th place. And the other car of interest that had made very good progress as we again, Steve Bailey, not afraid to get up onto the curbing, had been the John Bowe Alfie Costanzo Volvo, which with pit stops has been dropped to 17th place.
This Volvo is running about at the same pace as Moffat, well behind it, but running at about 1 minute 54.5 seconds.
Again, this sort of gathering that can make the traffic very difficult. Neil Lowe, he's the man that stays behind and does a lot of the development in the cars, a lot of the engineering changes, fiddling all the time with brake balance, with roll bars, springs, damper settings, and so on. A very good driver, but a very accomplished engineer as well.
Lowe, in fact, holds the lap record, or did before today, for this class of car. The outright sedan record is held by Francevic, but for the 5-litre class, it's held by Lowe, who did so well when Brock was overseas. He drove it here in the Touring Car Championship race.
And Neil Lowe raced at Spa and in fact finished ahead of Brock in 18th, with Brock in 22nd, 23rd
yes,
place.
Well, in fact, as I said earlier, they were in 8th place and looking as though they were going to zonk everybody and come home in a very respectable place. That was well after the 20th hour. But finally had problems, but they had it much later in the race, and that's why I was disappointed to see them run into trouble here, because really the two drivers in car 3, we're looking now at the 3rd placed car at number 2, but the drivers in the car, Neil Lowe, John Harvey, really do look after a motor car and are ideal long distance drivers, particularly on any circuit or any race that's going to prove very hard mechanically, as this one is on transmissions. Fairly battered Nissan down the tail end of that shot, but still going around quickly, and a little bit less battered, the Chickadee Commodore up front.
Which hopefully won't have to make a left-hand turn at any stage. The blinker flopping away there, it looked a little dangerously at one stage, and well, would something that small cause the marshals to bring a car in if they
No,
thought
not really. The only real danger out of that is to traffic that falls on the track. But in that sense, I suppose they'd be happy if they could drop off a bit like that every so often. Strategic points around the track, but Sod's Law would probably say they'd be the car around the next lap to run over it.
Well, perhaps Alan Moffat might have picked up something with that deflating tyre that brought him in.
Bailey's lost his hold here of Moffat. Moffat's crept away from Bailey, now right on the tail of the second of the Noble Holden dealer team cars. Bailey certain, making sure that he can give the car back to Grice in one piece.
He's doing a very good job, as also is Terry Shield in that Gary Scott Nissan that's not very far behind him. Shield is doing a fairly similar lap time, I think, to Bailey. Second to this car in 3rd place, 3.2 seconds. So not much in it. And that is, of course, from Alan Moffat, who Bailey was gluing himself onto a little while ago. If we go back past Terry Shield, we come to the other Peter Jackson team car. This is the race leader.
And looks as though he's on the verge of lapping 2nd and 3rd place men again.
Yes, indeed. Really is a stunning performance, this one. And I suppose the people in the pits watching their watches initially to see what sort of times Glenn Seaton was doing, but they know that he can do the times. It wouldn't have come as any surprise to see him doing similar times to George Fury. So as I say, what they're really looking at in the pits now is hoping for the scourge of turbocharged powered cars, their problems, and that's the Kevin Bartlett, Trevor Crowe JPS BMW that has had its second gearbox after locking in third gear and is obviously parking again. But yes, what they'd be hoping for is that this car gives problems. But so thorough has the Nissan team preparation been, and if I sound a fan, I'm only seeing it as the team has done it. And after they won Surfers, the following day, because they broke a drive line on the start, they went and did a 1,000 kilometre test. Let's have a look here at Trevor Crowe, Kevin Bartlett's car number 9. Never looked like a line to go around that corner.
Bouncy bounce.
As,
oh, get off the track, driver. Get that oil off the track.
I wonder if that happened before the corner, the blow, or after. Perhaps some oil on the brakes that prevented him stopping at that corner. I don't know, but some problems.
And I said earlier, there's a man around motor racing whose business it is, but it's also his love, as Bob Jane talks to Graham Crosby. And Bob Jane there, one of the tough guys around motor racing, built like Mario Andretti, which means he's not very tall, but he's about the build of an Australian second row forward.
I thought you were going to say a Mario Milano.
Probably Andretti and Milano combined. But Graham Crosby that he's talking to, drafted into his team recently in one of a 5-car team for Bathurst and a 3-car team for this race. Sorry, 2-car. The BMW that Gerhard Berger and Roberto Revelia will drive is here on the wharf in Melbourne right now. So all coming together for Bob Jane. Usually does, of course, if he keeps signing the checks, which Bob does. Race situation. So well over half distance. The in-between drivers in the cars at this stage, and David Ratcliffe, Don Smith. Don Smith.
3-wheeling's not the trick.
Don Smith, the regular, that used to partner Bo Seaton, of course, around Bathurst in some of his drives.
The right rear wheel has departed company from the car. You might recall that just a few laps ago, or 5 or 10 minutes ago, they replaced the right rear wheel. Maybe they didn't quite screw it on hard enough. Meanwhile, the car's gone off the road. Maybe it's clobbered the fence a little.
I hope the wheel didn't bounce over that fencing.
Yes. Don Smith, by the way, has a Ford Sierra for next year.
Quite a lot of Sierras building up in Australia. Dick Johnson headed that way. He's got a car and the spare body shell at this stage. The car will not appear, not be homologated until the start of racing next year.
Railless Kerry Bailey, lapped this time. That's by Fury. And he is 140 in front of Moffat. And he'll have him in his sights virtually. Bailey in between Moffat and Fury, or Seaton as it is now at the wheel.
Seaton sneaking up on Terry Shield, who's not far ahead of him on the road. Not making a lot of progress because Terry Shield's really driving the car well. Probably got instructions to give it a good run, make it work hard, so that they know what's going to break first if something should break under a hard driving situation.
There's Moffat and Bailey.
There's Shield.
Just in front of Shield.
And in fact, that lot, not very far in front. It's 5 seconds from them to the race leader, which you can see back there. Car 15 fighting for third place. So Terry Shield has made up a small gap to Graham Bailey. Third place Bailey, second place Moffat, and fourth place Shield. So this is a good one. The Nissan's first and fourth as we see one of the Capri V6s out in the dirt. Netcom entry of a 2-car team, and they're a long way further in than the Toyota Sprinter was.
A few people are very reluctant to leave the hospitality tent there to lend a hand, I think.
If you double the number of persons trying to shift the car and start bouncing it instead of trying to roll it, maybe you'll get somewhere.
There's another opinion that's been thrown into the ring coming from Jim Murcock.
Yes.
And waiting in the pits to get into his car for what looks like to be the last time is Larry Perkins. Larry, you took an early pit stop first time round. What happened?
Well, I knocked my seatbelt undone when I was having, opposite locking, and I had to drive for about 6 laps till I got past lap 18. We had a scheduled stop 18 laps from the finish, and now I just hope that we put it at the start, and then we won't have lost any time.
Well, your calculations show that it is possible that you can do it without another stop after this one.
Oh, very much so. This should be our last stop if it all goes according to schedule.
Larry, what's it like to drive a motor car without a seatbelt on?
Well, I tried it for a couple of laps, but I was losing too much time, and I was quite worried if I was in an incident where I needed the seatbelt. Well, it's just not on. You can't drive without the seatbelt.
Larry, thanks very much.
It's amazing that something always seems to go wrong like that with the car David Parsons is involved.
And we've lost Bailey. Bailey's gone back a spot to 4th. So Terry Shield comes up. He's in 3rd place now. Traffic helped him, and the team leader, the race leader, tucked in behind them as well.
This and what a first and second result here today, and have instructed Shield really to go for it.
Yes, this has been a stunning performance. Of course, it can all still fall apart. Absolutely no guarantees, but just the speed that they've shown so far, the fuel consumption, the organisation in the pits has really made them the team to beat without any shadow of a doubt. It's felt that George Fury feels he can beat his 2 minutes 13.8 second lap at Bathurst, done in the Bluebird Turbo. He can beat it in this Group A Skyline Turbo. Theoretically a less developed car, but one that's proving with sorting and so on to be faster generally. I mean, that's the case with Group A, as with the Commodores. That's the race situation. And most of the vehicles involved in this are in our picture at the moment, but finding that the Group A cars are starting to beat Group C times, have done so at quite a number of circuits. So now he goes forward further. John Harvey, he's a long way back actually. Harvey in car number 3 as in the pits. Here's Alan Moffat. It's a handover to Peter Brock.
Up with the
So that will make the Skyline team 1-2 as they go past us. It's Nissan's 1st and 2nd. Moffat will now have dropped back into 4th place.
The second scheduled stop for the Peter Brock Mobile Holden dealer team, and Brock's out in another wonderful time, less than 25 seconds. Unfortunately, Alan Moffat, with that unscheduled stop for the front left-hand tyre being flat, has caused the team to drop back. But now, with Brock out and with his attitude exactly right, we're going to see fireworks from Peter Perfect.
And 5th place now is Peter Perfect, with Richards having gone through as well. So he's got the job in front of him. The prediction has come from John Smales. Fireworks from this man.
And they are presently in 5th place.
Wrestling the car around on cold tyres, on fresh cold tyres. It'll take about 1 lap before he gets some warmth into the tread and really gets them to stick. Meanwhile, the Perkins car is in.
David
and
Parsons
is in.
Coming out of the car. I was talking about the problems that he'd had of a similar nature to Larry Perkins with the seatbelt. Parsons, remember having the door swinging open here a few years ago.
And a flurry of activity in the pits now as Larry Perkins' car comes in with David Parsons at the wheel. He hands over to LP. This is likely to be their last stop as well. Certainly it was the Brock team's last stop, and Grice won't be far behind, I'm sure. Whistles blow. Second churn of fuel is in. Problem with the front left-hand wheel. Fine, locks in. And Larry Perkins smokes out of the pits, almost taking out the rear of the Colin Bond Alfa Romeo as he goes, but a bad stop, 47.68 seconds.
And now it's Graham Bailey into the pits, so it's a sprint for John Smales to get down to the Chickaday Roadways pit. And Grice to take back over from the car owner Bailey. And Wheel Nut goes rolling across in front of the car. I hope they've got another one to put on that troublesome right front.
And wandering down there is George Fury in the hat there with his hands in his pockets. Doesn't look like the co-driver of the car that's leading the race. As blasting out comes Alan Grice.
Now we'll see some action.
Ah dear. O'Brien in the Bob Jane T-Mart's BMW. Charlie O'Brien, the car he's sharing with Gary Rogers, and they're desperately trying to find a bit of non-muddy ground where they can get up the rise a little bit.
That's Gary Rogers.
It is Gary Rogers, open face helmet. He's trying to swing it round, use momentum to get it out of the grass, but it's pretty frustrating. He's made it now. Peter McLeod's car giving problems.
Wrestling with the gear change here. Appears. Gear selection problems, obviously. This was the car that lost third and fifth gears earlier today and was driving around using only second and fourth. It appears that the gearbox problem is worse.
May not even have second and fourth.
The car is certainly well out of contention and has been from the early stages of the race, unfortunately for Peter.
Doesn't seem to be too many problems for Glenn Seaton. He's leading the race. He has a lap on his competition.
In fact, not so very far behind him on the road is Jim Richards, but of course he's blown out to not even on the same lap as he, and sandwiched between him and second placed Scott and Shield.
Peter Brock out after Richards, and really is starting to throw it around now. And there is Jim Richards, well and truly in his sights. So the leading driver seeming to have it at this stage, Seaton, barring any unforeseen problems with the car, but there's plenty of good racing going on back behind him.
Yes, back in fourth place. Richards in front, Grice now behind in car number 2. So sandwiched between cars 1 and 2. And I'm wondering, with the race leader with a 1 minute 49.67 lead, in other words, only about 4 seconds from lapping his teammate and second place car, whether the Nissans, rather than just a 1-2 finish, might do a 1-2 parade. We're on lap 85, 84 completed by the race leader, and Brock now back in the seat at 05. very, very keen at this race, which he's dominated. So too is, for that matter, as he dominated the James Hardie 1000 at Bathurst. Jim Richards dominated the Endurance Championship, but he isn't going to dominate this one. I think it would take a fair turnaround for the JPS BMW, which was hoping for one pit stop, but had already fallen out to a greater deficit than really made that viable to bring it back up into a top placing. Frank Gardner's early stop has really fallen out of the major contention.
Frank Gardner's script has fallen a little apart here today, with the number 2 car developing gearbox problems at the early stages. Then the car not going so well on fuel as was hoped, maybe because the pace of the other cars in the race forced Jim to drive the car a little harder than was planned before the weekend. With one pit stop, they would have been okay if they could have driven at a fast pace. But this year, the cars are going so fast, or their competition is going so fast, that they can easily make the 2 stops and still beat Richards comfortably.
So there they go down the straight. Richards in 3rd place, Brock 4th. They have just completed lap 84. In car number 30, Glenn Seaton and George Fury have completed 85 and are on 86.
Quite a beast of a car to drive, apparently, this BMW, with Tony Loghurst, the co-driver, behind the wheel. George Fury drove this car, or an identical car to this, almost identical to it, should we say, last year, and didn't have a lot of nice things to say. Neither did Alan Moffat. And there goes Peter Brock, whistles past him in the braking area.
Into 3rd place is Brock. Well, now that they can't get through a race like this with the 1 pit stop, and that they certainly don't have the speed to match the cars, is the writing on the wall for the BMW in Australian touring car racing?
No, I don't think so. We've still got other races, and BMW, in fact, is going more heavily into Group A with its withdrawal from Formula 1, and that's the commitment.
Well, for Peter McLeod, some days it's just not worth getting up. Peter, what's happened to the car?
Well, from about lap 3 or 4, we've only had 2 gears, a 2nd and 4th, which has made it pretty difficult to match the pace of the other cars, of course. And the gearbox has just come back to giving us 5 about 3 laps ago, and I thought, good, we can start winding the pace up a bit. And now the shaft has fallen out of the back completely, so we've got no gears. We're stuck in neutral, so until the boys are able to put it back together, we won't be going anywhere.
Well, do you think there's a chance that you'll get back into the race?
I haven't had a good look at it. I certainly hope so. The fellas will try and get it back out on the track. That's the first time in Sandown for Auto Part, and of course they'd like to be here at the end. So if we can get it back on the circuit, we certainly will. We're out of contention for any major placings now.
Well, Peter McLeod, like a lot of other people, has got problems, but he may get back on the track. Over Will Hagen, there are others who won't.
And these are the retirements. We saw Francevic, McRae scratch their car from the start after a high-level meeting about 30 minutes before the start. Dick Johnson's blown his gearbox. Holden and Cutchy gone out in one of the small cars. Kay and Thompson as well, Ratcliffe and John Smith. We heard him explain what had happened to his car. Crow and Bartlett, more significant among the front runners. The 3rd gear problem, a gearbox change, but then later retiring again. The Lusty car, you saw that, had been blowing smoke, got out in the grass and has now parked it. And then John Smith and Drew Price. In fact, I'd named too many Smiths around with Ratcliffe, but it was John Smith explaining what had gone wrong with their Toyota Sprinter. So quite a list of retirements out of 41 that qualified yesterday, but that had already been expanded with the XJS Jaguar scratching John Clinton. Let's have a look at this one. Commodore in a pile of trouble.
Larry Perkins.
And handled well. And Larry looking down the road and then starting to wonder who he's going to collect. But he hung on to it and threw it right round, and it expired in sort of a whirlpool there, coming onto itself.
Certainly he didn't want to land in the sand trap and require the assistance of 43 adults to get out.
Well, you saw second just disappearing from a picture, the Nissan Skyline. Terry Shield at the wheel. Here's the race leader. Seaton driving. So only one car hasn't been lapped, and that's the teammate of Glenn Seaton. And here's Perkins after the excursion.
Talking to a former Holden dealer team mechanic who's looking after the car for him, Neil Burns. He's the engine expert, one of a number of people that Brock, brake fluid. Brake fluid. That's why he went off, end of the straight, no brakes, going too fast, gone out wide, so don't blame Larry Perkins.
Larry Perkins back into the pits, unscheduled stop. They've had the bonnet open, looking underneath it. Now Neil Burns, the chief engine man, is round the front right of the motor car. There's obviously a problem somewhere with it. Perkins is not happy sitting inside, rather agitated. Bonnet coming up again. Suspension problem perhaps, or brake problem. They're working around the master cylinders. Engine off, and I'd say, no, back on again. Pressure problem perhaps. Perkins has run out of brakes. We're looking at the front 13-inch brake discs of his Holden Commodore, and undoubtedly Perkins at the moment is in a situation where he doesn't want to go back on the track when he's got no way of stopping the wretched thing, and that's the problem for Larry Perkins. The engine's off, and I'd say that Larry Perkins' race has run at least any competitive chances in this Castrol 500.
Well, he was in 7th place when that happened.
It appeared the brake pad material had disappeared from the backing plate because of the scrape marks on the disc itself. Of course, if you have to tip that amount of brake fluid into the top of the cylinder, it's got to be going somewhere. And right from the start, that looked like a pretty disastrous situation for Larry, who's tried so hard for a new sponsor to motorsport, NZ, and Larry was really keen to do so well. They have a spare car, by the way, which they can't wheel out now, but they'll certainly be shaping up for future races pretty heavily.
So that's the gap all the way forward to this car that leads the race. So all but a few seconds of a lap, the lead being held by George Fury and Glenn Seaton over Gary Scott and Terry Shield. 3rd place, Peter Brock, Alan Moffat. So it's 2 Nissan Skyline turbos from the Holden Commodore V8. Charlie O'Brien, Gary Rogers' cars recovered, running in front of the race leader on the track. And really, if you have worried about Nissan reliability in the past on the racetrack, well, there's a convincing demonstration of it here. With the front end of the car fairly extensively smashed, the car has continued to run like clockwork despite the damage.
Well, 7 laps to go to his schedule stop, and Graham Crosby is all kitted up but nowhere to go. What's happened, Cros?
Well, I believe one of our the drivers had a lose over the back section there, and I'm just wondering whether or not he's actually flat spotted the tyre, so we're preparing ourselves just in case. We've got a scheduled stop coming up in about 7 laps' time, and I'll go back in the car and finish the rest of the race.
Well, it's good precaution, I guess, to be kitted up just on the off chance.
Well, yeah, it's, you know, like my hair's not very good anyway in a cap or anything, but the old helmet's nice and warm.
You're enjoying your motor racing, Cross, no matter what.
Oh, hell yeah, great fun.
Well, I'm sure Glenn Seaton's enjoying it too.
Yeah. But that is the essence of it, isn't it? Have a laugh, enjoy it, do absolutely your best. Greg Hansard, similar. Very light-hearted attitude in the pits might suggest the guy's not serious. It's totally professional, as is Graham Crosby. And there's the car. Yes, coming home, Graham. Whether it'll come to see you or not is another matter, but we're with it. And we're travelling in one of the best ways known to man, I reckon, by helicopter.
And you saw Crosby didn't hop into the car, well, not on that lap anyway. It's gone past the pit entrance. Wayne Wilkinson at the wheel of the Bob Jane T-Mart Commodore, and behind him the second place man, Terry Shield.
Running on 1 minute 53.3, Shield, so the wick is still turned up. They're still trying fairly hard. There's a couple of seconds left in the car, should the occasion be necessary, but doing it comfortably, travelling very fast at the same time.
90 laps are completed, 39 still to run, and it's taken 2 hours 50.58 for that 90 laps, averaging 123.1 kilometres an hour. Very slow track, this Sandown now, slow corners. Graham Wilkinson, quite successful driver in New Zealand, one who has his odd ragged moments, but joining Graham Crosby for this effort, and Bob Jane waving the monetary wand over them.
The Kiwi assaults continuing.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, I believe there's hardly a sheep being shorn over there at the moment. Everybody's over here. Every businessman, every New Zealander you meet too in motor racing, he's a businessman. And they tell us the finances are bad in that country, but by gee, they're all worth a fortune. All these cars cost an arm and a leg over there. Graham Crosby, at the beginning of the year, for car, transporter, spares, everything else, was a couple of $100,000. The guy's got a motorbike shop selling Yamahas over there, and he says, oh, it doesn't do very well. But of course, he was in World Championship motorcycle racing, and they get pretty well paid for the skills that they bring to that particularly exciting sport. Here we are, race leader, Wilkinson.
Third gear, into fourth.
Car 6 in 6th place, car 30 in 1st.
George is now in 5th gear, braking hard, a shallow line, back to 3rd. He's really offline there. Brakes hard, back to 2nd in the Nissan for this tight little S-bend. Not hitting the curbs too hard. 2nd gear again for the entry onto the back straight. Quickly into 3rd. Wave through there by the Toyota. 4th gear now. Winding it up on the uphill back straight. Now it's hard on the brakes and back to 2nd gear for the corner that really comes back. Briefly into 3rd gear. Back to 2nd now for Glenn Seaton. It's right on the tail of the Brian Bolwell BMW with Tony Farrell as co-driver. Tony in the car at the moment. Into 3rd now for Glenn for this sweeper. Catching up with the Capri. 2nd gear again. Being thrown around a fair amount. No wonder Larry Perkins couldn't keep his times going without a seatbelt. 2nd gear still for the old Dandenong Road corner under the Winfield sign. Back to 3rd. A little shoot of flame. 2nd gear now for a right-hander, brushing the curb on the left and the right, touching the dirt perhaps, not that time, and into the main straight.
A lap around Sandown with Glenn Seaton and Jim Murcott.
Glenn's still running low 53s in this car, so they're not laying off by any means.
Although the 2nd place Nissan has pulled away from them. Probably gone out to about a 7-second lead. So they're pacing themselves steadily and sensibly.
Car 87, Brian Bolwell there.
Yes, the
BMW not pussyfooting there behind the Crosby Wilkinson car.
That's Brian's co-driver, Tony Farrell. Tony is a motor racing engineer who builds sports cars. The support for this car from Kitten Car Products came on Friday night after the company saw the good presentation and got the sign writers out there and then in the garage on pit lane on Friday night. Tony designs and builds racing cars and certainly knows them from the ground up, as we we go back to the leader.
Who is 6.84 seconds in arrears to the second place car. That's on the racetrack, and that's, of course, Gary Scott, Terry Shield, behind or ahead on the track, but a lap minus 6.84 seconds behind George Fury, Glenn Seaton. They've completed 92 laps. They're on their 93rd. And one finds it hard to see why things should go wrong for them from here. They're obviously able to keep within a safe rev range in the engine. It produces power from 4.5 to 6,500 revs. That's the race situation. Nearly a lap to second place Scott Shield, and on the same number of laps as Brock Moffat. But as I say, they're able to keep the revs safe, even although maximum power comes in at 6,500 revs. They can rev them safely to 7. They're looking after the brakes. Temperatures are looking right. He's just done a 53.85. And that's a pretty comfortable cruise for a car that qualified at 150.22, slower only than Peter Brock's 149.8 in his Holden Commodore.
Again, as you watch this car travelling around, there's very little slip from the car. These cars are not designed to travel sideways, they travel straight ahead. And the car's really being looked after that way. Here comes Jim Richards.
Lap 94, and any chance that the JPS BMW team had of getting through this race with only one stop has evaporated. Tony Longhurst is out of the car, Jim Richards is in, Frank Gardner, laconic as ever, is at the front of the motor car. 2 churns of fuel, now on the third already, 17 seconds gone. Struggling to get the back wheel on the left-hand side, had to get the jacks back up again. They were letting it down prematurely, and that's cost him a few precious seconds. Everything else is right on the car except the back left. It's right to go. Jimbo is in the motor car. 33 seconds gone. Boy, oh boy, a slow stop from JPS BMW. 36.25 seconds.
6:35, CSI goes back out. And it's Richards back in the car. The winner last year with Tony Longhurst. They're running 1-2 in the championship. They've dropped back to 5th place after that stop. Longhurst was competing in the 3:25. That's now up for sale if anyone wants to get into motor racing. 48 points after 2 rounds in the championship. Longhurst 46. They'll score points together in this race.
Tony Longhurst, I think they've brought him in early to get Richards into the car and to try and pump the thing along a little bit harder. But Longhurst has put in some outstanding performances. He was very unlucky to lose only 10 minutes from the end. The Nissan 500 street race in Wellington earlier this year. Drove superbly with Trevor Crowe, the man who was to partner Kevin Bartlett in the second car today. But a wheel came off only about 10 or so laps from the end when they were really flying.
Tony Longhurst, any chance that you may have had to get through on one stop well and truly evaporated?
Yeah, our car's using a lot more fuel than last year. Because of the circuit, last year we were able to use second gear on all the tight twisty bits, but this year we've got to use first gear because we're more revs down the straight. And actually our lap times are really no better than what they were last year.
For what it's worth, for what consolation it's worth, at least you're the first of the normally aspirated motor cars.
Oh, that's good, but Sandown and Calder just don't suit our car. You know, there's like half a dozen drag strips here. You pull into a corner, you're in low gear, and you've got to accelerate to the end of the straight. We need circuits where the car can get through corners and handle, and we just have to see how the afternoon pans out. But the car's very strong, there's no problems with it at all the temperatures are spot on.
Well, from one viewpoint, I guess the Nissans are entering their danger period now, with the race temperatures really getting up in the closing stages.
He might be able to start to coast now. We're obviously a lap or 2 back.
You're 2 laps back, Tony.
2 laps back. Well, we've got no chance of putting on any pressure. We can only hope to inherit places from now on. I'm just looking forward to getting to Bathurst where we can use the handling of the car and do some decent times. Just here with a full load of petrol, the car just wouldn't pull it onto the straight. There's not much else I can say.
Thanks, Tony.
You're welcome.
Yes, I think, quite frankly, they've got it wrong. What Tony Longhurst said is obviously right, but I think the planning for this meeting, this race, in the JPS BMW team went wrong from what I understand of what they've done. They've gone to a 17-inch tyre, low profile, and they've altered the back axle ratio. They've gone a lower number, so taller, longer, to keep the revs down on the straight. That means, as Tony Longhurst said, they need lower gears in the corners. They need first gear on 3 occasions. It's mucked up all their fuel consumption calculations, as he said. It hasn't improved our lap times. And when I mentioned to Fred Gibson, I said, do you use first gear anywhere around here? And he said, no way. I said, well, one of your opposition cars is. They're using it on 3 occasions. He said, oh, I don't want to use first. That's too hard on the transmission. The bloke that didn't want to do it is leading the race 1 and 2, and the people that were doing it are back in 5th.
Well, they lost the transmission in their second car, but it's held up in the first anyway. Glenn Seaton leading the race and looking impregnable at this stage.
.33 laps remaining. Nissan's 1 and 2, still a Holden dealer team car of Peter Brock 3rd. And behind them comes in car number 2, Graham Bailey, Alan Grice, they're 4th. Richards and Longhurst are 5th, Crosby, Wilkinson are 6th, Peter Williamson 7th, John Harvey's up to 8th. And 36 is Murray Carter, Bill O'Brien, about where he qualified. Then in car number 8 it's Warren Cullen, and then in car number 7 is Charlie O'Brien, Gary Rogers, despite their spin.
So with 33 left, is Glenn Seaton airborne for a moment. Looks as if it could be 2 in a row for the Fury Seaton Skyline. They won at Surfers Paradise in the second round of the championship from Richards and Johnson, after Richards took the first round at Amaroo from Longhurst and Colin Bond in the Alpha GTV. And a new Alpha, I believe, will making its debut at Bathurst, the 75.
Well, no. Sorry, Peter, but plans have changed late. And just as interesting as the 75 Turbo coming to Bathurst is the alternative plan. And the alternative plan is that Warwick Rookland's son, whose name I'll think of in a moment.
Jack Rookland's son, Warwick.
Jack Rookland's son, Warwick, righto. Warwick Rookland's son has bought the Toy Shop Alpha from Paul Halstead. That's the toy shop in Sydney, and will run it at Bathurst as a second car to the GTV that Colin Bond's running here. They won't get the 75 in time, and so that starts up for the first time next year.
With Lucio Cesario as co-driver.
And Peter Brock, 05. He's was 3rd place.
Not so perfect?
No, sir. No. He said, yesterday I was as happy as a sandboy. I enjoyed my qualifying lap. The others were tensed up, having to report to team captains and so on. He said, I was just doing what I enjoyed. But car 15 was already in front of him. The cars behind him were Grice in 2, Richards in 1. So we'll get a check on how much time that cost Brock and what it meant in terms of positions in just a moment. But Peter Brock, about whom a lot has been said in recent times about these polarizers in which he's interested and which he says mean a lot to a car's performance if you carry them in a car. I've talked to him at some length about it and got details from him on it. And he said you get vibrations and frequencies in the car, as indeed you do, going through suspensions, in the bodywork and so on, and engineers indeed do spend a lot of time tuning those out. Peter Brock says if you use my polarizer, it does it for you, emitting lots of different frequencies. Whether he's right or whether he's wrong is yet to be proved, but certainly there are plenty of skeptics doubting him. Peter Brock says it has been more important in my life for the last year than the motor racing. And he said, I don't mind more or less what happens here.
That spin on the infield from Brocky, it'll cost him about 13 seconds. He's been running around 53.5 seconds per lap A fairly harmless spin, but something that cost him 13 seconds all the same.
So 13 seconds benefit goes to the second place man, Terry Shield here. I guess there's a few different frequencies coming from the front of that car. The configuration altered somewhat in the first lap.
The new shape that we have at Sandown, or have had over the past couple of years, means that mistakes can be made, errors can be made, cars can run off and smack the fence now and again, or spin and recover, or whatever. Very little chance of serious damage to a car these days, because Sandown was renowned as really one of the tricky tracks. Make a mistake and you're off and in trouble was the old way at Sandown. Now the corners are slower. You don't have the great big fast teeth gritting corners that we used to have here, and it's much safer. Unfortunately, the drivers don't like it as much either.
Volvo being wheeled around very energetically by John Bowe.
Spoke about Colin Bond. There he is in the yellow Alpha.
1 minute 54 even seconds for the Volvo from John Bowe just 2 laps ago.
The Alpha qualified very well yesterday, as ever, with Colin Bond. 15th place, and it's been working its way forward. It was one stage in 18th place. Things seem to have gone wrong since there. We don't have a check on him any better position than that, and that's of about 7 laps ago. But it is a car running very well in the Endurance Championship overall, which is being led by BMW with 48 points from Alfa Romeo on 36, as in comes the John Harvey car, Nissan on 28, Holden on 26.
Lap 97, and it's the second of the Mobile Holden dealer team cars in the pits. Neil Lowe, the team engineer, is out of the car. John Harvey now in. This, of course, the third stop for the second of the Mobile Holden dealer team cars. It took an unscheduled stop when the front sway bar on the left-hand side fell off early in the race, and these two men have been having a devil of a job trying to keep the car on the track with only half its front suspension working. Physically it's very demanding, but the car is also a wretch of a thing to handle, and Harvey was not looking forward to getting back into the motor car for this run. 36.54 seconds.
Well, the Mobile Holden dealer team been very impressive in the pits today. They took the prize at Spa for the hardest working pit crew. They had plenty of work to do over there.
Indeed they did. It was a bit of a sort of reverse glory situation. As we see here, Peter McLeod making life a bit difficult.
And nearly getting himself into a bit of strife doing so. Harvey is on cold tyres. That'll take about a lap to get them nicely warm. In the meantime, McLeod's nipped through to keep his pace up. Harv will catch him in a moment and come through.
Stepping out of the John Harvey car, Neil Lowe is absolutely exhausted. Neil, what's it like to drive with the suspension as it is?
Not very nice. I just cannot get it around the corners. So it's going so slow, I guess it's better to let John in. He's a bit fresher than what I am, and maybe he can get it going a bit quicker.
How physically demanding is it on you?
Sorry?
How physically demanding is it on you?
I'm pretty exhausted. I think I've only done 40 or 50 laps. I don't know that I could do another 10.
You wouldn't wish it on John Harvey, would you?
No. He's a good friend of mine, but I feel sorry for him, but I'd rather be here than out there.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Let the team manager do the work.
Well, indeed, what John Harvey hasn't driven and won in a career that goes back to the late 50s. Speedway, single-seater racing cars, sports cars, touring cars. And as we said yesterday in our coverage of practices, he's Mr. I'm available if you want me. Stands aside, runs the workshop for the Holden dealer team, putting out its improved road cars, but steps into the car having only a few drives a year, and as yesterday can qualify at 5th in a field of 39. So a pretty handy sort of a guy at 46 years of age to have around. Australian 1.5 litre champion in 1966, that was 20 years ago. drove Mini Cooper S's when he first came into road racing a year or two earlier than that. He's driven 2.5 litre, the major Australian Formula racing cars, had a bad crash at Bathurst. He's driven the fastest sports cars in the country. And as I say, he can still pilot a touring car around. And finally, of course, he won a Bathurst in that 3-driver effort with Larry Perkins and Peter Brock.
Jimmy mightn't have handled a worse handling car than the mobile Commodore at the moment.
Maybe he might not get past that Peter McLeod Commodore as easily as one would have first thought. You can see him sitting there wrestling away, trying to get the car around the corner, trying to stop the oversteer, trying to overcome the understeer. Goodness knows what it's going to do next. And really having a big battle on his hands. McLeod certainly doesn't have it going easy for him. You can see his car sliding around a fair amount. Maybe his tyres are in a little bit of trouble. There's Harve really working on the steering.
And he's in 11th place. Peter McLeod, by comparison, is a long, long way back. Finally getting mobile again after we got a demonstration of how to get a gearbox out and fix it. And you saw Harvey there going out wide, and life is sure tough at the moment.
Harvey's had a pretty clear lap, apart from the car directly in front of him, which is posing no obstruction to him, but he's dropped about 5 seconds a lap, 1 minute 58 even, compared with his practice time, or the sort of time you'd expect him to be doing today, about 1:53. That's about 1.5 to 2 seconds slower than his practice time yesterday.
He wants some rubber? There it is. Some of the most expensive rubber in the world, littering the edges of the track, working its way off these racing slicks.
Yes, if you've heard of the marbles, there it is. We've just seen it coated down both sides of the track, where it drops off the tyres as it shreds and grips. Get into that stuff and you're in trouble.
Harvey trying to use the curbing to straighten the car. He wants to arrive at the curbing not so fast that he rides over it. He wants to arrive there fast enough that he just uses the curbing as a little bit of added resistance to straighten the car up. And that helps ease his problem. So that's what he's trying for at each corner. Grabbing third and half turns of lock and grabbing them very, very quickly because he needs them right now.
These are the sort of days when the driver's saying to himself, why the bloomin' hell do I really want to do this?
Well, it's the sort of days too when drivers earn their money.
The development session for the Volvo keeps on keeping on. John Bowe about to get into the motor car. His co-driver about to come out, little Alfie Costanzo. At least Alfredo has now been able to get a few miles under his belt in the Volvo. Mind you, they wouldn't be too comfortable miles given the fact that they've had a brake problem. Bowe was just saying that he put his foot on the brake a little while ago and it went straight to the floor right as he was going deep into the corner at the end of the main straight. So this is a good development exercise for the team. John Shepherd at the front of the motor car is feeling good. The engine, of course, is boiling, but that's par for the course. They slam the engine down on it. Out of sight, out of mind, and Bowe will go out to finish the race. Robbie, elected not to drive the second Volvo this morning, has left the circuit. And not to put too fine a point on it, it would appear that that doesn't worry the team too much, at least some of the team members. So a bit of friction in the Volvo team at the moment, which hopefully will be resolved between now and the James Hardy 1000 at Bathurst in 3 weeks' time. And the time for the Bowe pit stop was 1 minute, 1.93 seconds, so it's very obvious that they're in the middle of a development session at the moment.
Seems incredible that a team that won the Touring Car Championship and Robbie Francevic, the Touring Car Champion, should be having such problems, having, well, taken the first 2 rounds of the Manufacturers Endurance Championship off to get the car really ready for the big races, Sandown and Bathurst, and yet it appears that there's nothing like the development you get from racing.
Indeed, that's critical, but how hard you have to work. Fred Gibson has been driving his people in the Peter Jackson Nissan team. They have been working, every one of the 10 members of the team, they have been working 12 hours a day for 6 days a week. And recently, 3 weeks ago, they went on to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's 84 hours a week. And, you know, when do you relax? What do you do in life other than have a meal and sleep and come back to work? and that's how hard they're working. But that's what's required. If you want cars to be running 1 and 2, it's a sort of commitment, as we see the second car in the pits. It's a sort of commitment you need to cover the enormous amount of work that's necessary to get a racing team to fine pitch.
And the Terry Shields second Nissan Turbo has just been into the pits for a lightning stop. It was planned by team leader Fred Gibson that they bring it in and give it a security churn of fuel, and that's exactly what's happened. Now Gibson is absolutely adamant that George Fury in the lead can stay out there until the end, but they thought it best just to bring Shield in and give him a security churn just to be on the safe side.
And he's stayed in second place. So a 1-2 coming up for the Nissan Turbo.
In fact, we need to clarify that because, of course, George Fury's in mufti down in the pits, and it's Glenn Seaton in the car, and in this car, Scott. So that's the situation.
At this stage, we have Peter Brock in third position. He's only about 7 seconds in front of Alan Grice. Alan Grice in fourth position, working pretty hard on the car, running about 1 minute 53 at the moment, so we could have a good, interesting situation for third position before this race is out.
The Shield pit stop has worked so well that Fred Gibson now has the confidence that he's going to bring George Fury in after all. So George Fury to come in right now for one security churn of fuel. Now, any time that a pit stop's on, it's critical. Something can go wrong. So stand by for George Fury's security stop.
So a nice situation for the Nissan team to be in. Not such a nice situation for the Capri, being driven by Rex Muldoon and David Salla.
Part of a two-car team, in fact, that
both are off the circuit at this stage.
yes, indeed, not